Hey everybody, I'm Sean. Welcome to another episode of Adventuring Spiders. Welcome back everybody. On today's episode, I am in the heart of oil sands country. I am standing right beside the Syncrude oil sands property. And this is the Giants of Industry display. I'm going to show you this and a few other things related to the oil sands exploration on today's episode of Adventuring Spiders. All right, everybody. First up, we have here on display is the bucket wheel, and it is long. According to the information here, it's 560 feet or 140 meters long, and the buckets on the end here that you can see on this wheel, why it's called the bucket wheel, which is used for digging up the sand. Each of the buckets on this thing holds 1.8 cubic yards, the equivalent of 24 buckets on there. And so the average rate when it's going is 54 buckets per minute, or 7,263 cubic meters of soil per hour. So this thing can move a lot of soil. And of course, in order to do that, it's got to have a massive boom and a control unit here. Probably no surprise, but in order to move that bucket, this thing needs a lot of horsepower, and in fact it has 12,000. Has an operating weight of 2,400 tons, and the replacement value of this unit at the time when it was operating was $34 million for this one piece of equipment. Sole purpose of this thing? To dig up oil sand. And dig up sand it did. And it just keeps going and going and going. Pretty amazing stuff. Right next to this, we've got this impressive piece of equipment which just keeps going and going and going. So let's learn a little bit about this massive unit. All right, everybody, so now I'm standing right beside it, and maybe you can see the size of it now that I'm standing right here. This is the Discovery Dragline. What a massive piece of equipment. And some stats on this thing. The boom length on this is 360 feet long. Or 110 meters, which is basically the same as the length of a football field. Just the boom. The bucket size on this thing is 61 cubic meters, and I'll show you the bucket on this separately. They've got one sitting here out on the lawn, so I'm going to show you that in a second. But the bucket is 61 cubic meters, basically 150 ton capacity. That one bucket. This thing has horsepower, 28,000 horsepower to run this piece of machinery. Operating weight of 6,200 tons. And each of the shoes, the walking shoes, which are right here at the bottom, that move this thing, each of the walking shoes is 4.2 meters wide by 22 meters long, and each step, so this thing takes steps, took about 40 seconds. This thing's replacement cost, if you had to replace this piece of equipment, $110 million. Are you kidding me right now? Talk about investment. Amazing stuff. And there's the operator's cockpit on either side of this thing. And there's a close-up of that big boom that dragged that bucket. And as I said, I'm going to show you that bucket. Look at the chain. Look at the chain. Unbelievable. So I was just reading the sign for this dragline chain here, and each of these links weighs 250 pounds. So unbelievable. Let's go check out the bucket. This is the bucket for that dragline, and you can just see how big these are. Not only the weight of the bucket itself, look how thick that steel is, but just the capacity of this bucket alone, which is basically the back of a dump truck in one scoop. Pretty amazing. And of course you can stand in this one. You can get right in here. And it's well over my head. Well over my head. Crazy. All right, everybody, so that's just a few of the pieces of old mining machinery that you can see here at the Syncrude exhibit. You would have just heard a shot going off around me. That is I believe the bird deterrents going off. So they put off bangers, and those go off every so often as bird deterrents on the tailings ponds up here in the oil sands. So if you hear those bangings, that's not a gunshot. But yeah, that's just a couple pieces of equipment that you can see here next to Syncrude. And next I want to show you from a distance, because I can't get close to it, the plant itself. All right, so from where I'm standing, you can just see the Giants of Mining display that's on next to the highway here near Syncrude, right between the east and west mines. And just across the road from that is the Syncrude main plant, and you can see it off in the distance. This is where they process the bitumen to extract the hydrocarbons, the oil and other hydrocarbons. You can see the flare stacks there, you can see the cokers, and a very busy highway. Obviously this is an operating facility. So I can't get much closer than this as a member of the public, but you can see that the main processing plant for Syncrude is right here. And just down the road, about 10 kilometers, is a very similar plant for Suncor. What I do find interesting is that in a very different time of my life, probably now 20 years ago, that's hard to believe, I worked up in this area as an archaeologist. And the area that you see right behind me, which is East Mine, at that time was an active mine. And there would be trucks going in and out of there. What is amazing to me now, having visiting this area 20 years later, is that East Mine is now under active reclamation. And what you can see right behind me here is very clearly trees that have grown. It is an area that is now overgrown with a very young forest, and it's got a ways to go, but you can clearly see that it's under active reclamation and the area is being reclaimed back to forest. So it is interesting to see how this area has evolved. New pits have been opened, but old pits have been closed and are under current reclamation, and someday will be completely reclaimed by the forest. All right, so I just want to give you a closer shot here of the tailings storage area. This is a pond right in front of me, this water. This is actually water capping. Then the tailings from the oil sands recovery process are sitting underneath this water. And you can hear the bird deterrent going off. So the water is capping the tailings, which are sitting underneath the water, and the process here is supposed to, the weight of the water is supposed to compress the tailings that are sitting underneath it over time, which makes the water deeper over time, which then creates more pressure, and over time it just continues to compress the tailings. So this is one of the things that they're trying to process, oil sands tailings. And this was once West Mine, and I'll put a picture up of what this area right in front of me used to look like. It used to be a large open pit mine. Off in the distance here, across the highway where the vehicles are, is East Mine. That's the area I was showing you that's currently under reclamation. There are some open sand areas there, but a good portion of that is now grown over. And then of course we've got the actual Syncrude plant off in the distance here, and the large machinery associated with the Giants of Mining display right next to Syncrude. So another overview of some of the oil sands area here. Also, I don't think I mentioned it before, but this area where Syncrude is and Suncor just a little bit south is about a half an hour to 40 minutes away from Fort McMurray. So if you drive up the highway 63 north of Fort McMurray, you end up in the oil sands area, and you pass Suncor at about a half an hour, about 30 miles, and then you get to Syncrude next, another 10 miles up the road. So this whole area that I'm sitting in is only about a half an hour to 40-minute drive outside of Fort McMurray, easily accessible. You can come check it out yourself if you're in the area. All right, everybody, I have left the oil sands region north of Fort McMurray, and now I'm back in Fort McMurray, and I'm at the Oil Sands Discovery Center. This is a museum in Fort McMurray dedicated to the exploration and development of the oil sands. So I'm gonna go check it out, and I'm gonna hopefully share some of the exhibits with you guys. Let's go take a look. All right, so here we go. This is the first step into the Oil Sands Discovery Center. Lots of interactive displays, and I will share a few of them. Very interesting. Here's a scale model of a dragline and a bucket wheel, and of course we saw both of these, old versions of these, just the other day at Syncrude. And there's a video of the bucket wheel operating. Now, one of the really interesting things about this Discovery Center is this, the big truck. They have on display here a scale model, a full-scale model of one of the trucks used to haul the oil sand, and you can go up into it in the cockpit and have a look. But just the scale and size of these trucks is something else. Look at the size of this tire here. Here's the engine. So let's go up inside this giant beast of a truck. Interesting little diagram here of the evolution of these trucks over time. 1957, the payload was 170 tons. By 1992, 240 tons. And by 1999, 400 tons. And here we are, standing at the top, and we can see what it's like. We can actually sit in the cockpit. You can see how far down it is here to the floor. It is a long ways up, and you get a little video here of what it's like to be pretending to drive one of these things in the oil sands. Here's the cockpit. This is probably dark, but this is the setup. And here we are behind the wheel. And I can tell you there are some significant blind spots, particularly out to this side. And even though there's a mirror over there, that mirror is a long ways away. And so I'm assuming now that the more recent versions of these trucks have electronics and actual cameras so that they can be seeing the sides and around. Otherwise, I can see how you would end up with incidents of not being able to see what's behind you, and there are stories of these trucks running over things, and given the weight of these trucks, it would definitely destroy anything it ran over. Big part of the research into the oil sands is finding ways to deal with tailings, how to treat tailings, and then how to use that in reclamation purposes. And there's a lot of information here at the Oil Sands Discovery Center on reclamation and how they are going to reclaim the land after the oil sands mining is done, and management of tailings is a big part of that. There's a couple of really interesting displays here about the challenges of oil sands mining, and particularly the viscosity of heavier, thicker oil versus lighter crude. And this display is just one of those examples. You can come over here and crank this one, which is the thinner oil, and you can see here that it starts to turn pretty easy and really easy to crank, and it distributes it pretty easy. Where I'm guessing I'm gonna do this one. Yeah. Much more energy required to get this one flowing. Ooh, a lot more energy required to get this one flowing. Which of course creates challenges for moving that viscous fluid. Test the viscosity of different grades here, and so what they've got is very diluted bitumen, and heated bitumen. The diluted bitumen, super easy. In fact, there's no resistance at all. The heated bitumen, a little bit, I would say like molasses. And then the straight bitumen, extremely hard to lift. So imagine trying to get that through a pump. It's crazy. This is a pretty good display, just on how a centrifuge works. And most people know how a centrifuge works, but I thought this was a very good practical display on showing how a centrifuge can separate particles. Very basic but effective. Alright everybody, so similar to the Giants of Mining display by Syncrude, the Oil Sands Discovery Center does have a few big pieces of equipment here on display in their bucket wheel area. Unfortunately, a storm just went through and it had a lot of lightning, and so they closed off this fence because they don't want people by big, large, tall metal equipment when there's a lightning storm. So I'm not able to go in there, but the equipment is very similar to what's on display at Syncrude. That's going to do it from here in Fort McMurray. Just a very quick trip to show you a little bit of oil sands related material. Of course, if you're ever in the Fort McMurray area, you can do this stuff for yourself. And for those of you that'll never get here, I hope it gives you a little bit of a glimpse, just a minor one, into the oil sand industry here in northern Alberta. With that, I'm going to close this one out. As always, if you like the video, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and until next time, good adventuring.